Hello, welcome to the video for Chapter 7 and associated homework. I want to start with just a few things to emphasize before we jump right into stuff that will help you solve the Chapter 7 homework directly. In general, when we're evaluating cash flow producing properties, we're interested, of course, in the financial objectives for two sets of players. First and foremost, the operator or equity or sponsor. And the objectives for this player are, first of all, you've got to know your opportunity cost of capital. That's number one. Number two is, as always, same as in development, we need to be able to get for that player their comprehensive after-tax cash flows for this project. We should have in mind a risk strategy. We looked at in development, for example, expected sale, that was our target sale price, our poor market condition sale price, and our great market condition sale price. So that's the type of thing I mean by risk strategy. We'll do more on that later in the term. Next, as we've seen in class, you want to compute your projected operating ratios. So this is really just ratio analysis for a property manager. Next, finally, we want to compute from the comprehensive after-tax cash flows for everything, purchasing the property, operating it, and then exiting, usually selling it to someone else. We want to compute those NPVs given our opportunity cost of capital, and we're going to try and think about the NPVs in the context of our risk strategy. And then putting that all together, the NPVs in the context of our risk strategy will make a go or no-go decision. Okay. Second player that we always want to consider is the lender. Just as for equity or operator, the lender always needs to know their opportunity cost of capital. And for the lender, we want to get her comprehensive cash flows for this project. She also is going to need to have a risk strategy. How risky is this borrower? If this is a long-term loan, what could happen with interest rates globally, et cetera, et cetera. And then using the comprehensive cash flows for this project for the lender, we want to compute her IRRs, one IRR per scenario for her risk strategy. And then similarly to the equity player, the operator, she's going to decide whether or not to give this putative operator a loan or not. Okay, so a little bit more specifically, this homework is all going to be about the purchase of an operating property. So I put together a little checklist for the operator, what we have to be sure we address, and then also for the lender. Okay, so for purchasing a cash flow producing property, we need all the base data that we discussed in class, our assumptions on how we think NOI is going to grow and grow relative to revenue. We need to know about tax rates, all that stuff. We talked about that in class. It's a lot of stuff. And then we're going to have to know how much we're paying for this property and related fees. We looked at lawyers' fees. There could also be brokers' fees, etc. And then, as I said in class, actually, the lender really always drives everything. So we're going to have to know about the mortgage details that we can get for this property. What's the loan to value our mortgage lender is going to assign to us? We need to know the structure of the mortgage. We're assuming in this class uniform payment fixed rate mortgages. The term, the example we used in class had a 30-year term. We need to know the interest rate. The interest rate for the example we used in class for Apex was 10%. We need to know the amount of the uniform payment, and we looked at how to solve for that in class, and I'm going to look at that in much more detail with you now. We need to know what fees the lender is going to charge us, and we need to put together that roll forward interest and amortization table that we looked at. Similarly, from the lender's perspective, the lender has a checklist of her own, which is always actually a subset of what an equity player or operator needs to know. The lender needs to know the purchase price of the property. She needs to decide on her mortgage details. What's the loan to value she's going to let this borrower get away with? What's the structure of the loan she's going to give that operator? And again, we're going to assume uniform payment fixed rate in this class. She needs to assign a term, and interest rate, and once she's got that together in the real world, the way it always works is she'll have a junior person like one of you all, figure out for her what's the uniform payment that is going to be required for the operator. And she's going to determine her fees. These are usually just front-end fees called points, but there are, as was the case with development, there could be back-end fees too. Hard money lenders, for example, are notorious for charging both front-end fees and back-end fees. And she doesn't need the roll forward interest amortization table. Okay, so with all of this in our pocket, what I'd like to do is jump back to not the recording software, but I would like to jump back to um, the spreadsheet that we looked at in class for Chapter 7, which is also in the Chapter 7 outline slides, basically just screenshots taken from this spreadsheet. But I've modified the spreadsheet a little bit just to highlight some of the important things that we need to solve for as an operator and also as a mortgage lender, i.e., things that are on the checklist that have to be solved for, and at the end of the day, making sure we meet our objectives, finding the NPV of the project for the operator, and the IRR of the project for the lender. We can't find the NPV of the project for the operator yet because we're just doing purchase right now. For the operator, we're going to need to know all the cash flows related to the purchase, but we're also going to need to know all the cash flows related to operating the property. And we're also going to need to know all the cash flows related to the sale of the property. And those are going to be complicated by tax matters that we haven't looked at quite yet. So right now, I just want to focus on getting the finances of the purchase of the property sorted out. So that's in this spreadsheet, Chapter 7 Apex Operate on the purchase page. And again, this unsolved version just pretty much is exactly the same as the version we looked at in class without some things already solved for us. Okay, so we're going to start with, remember the loan is really going to drive everything for equity, so we're actually going to start on this spreadsheet. Once we know the purchase price of the building, which we do know here, $4.2 million, we're gonna go talk to a lender and work out the lender's details. So we talk to the lender. The lender assigns us a 20% loan to value, so we're not going to get much from the lender, but the lender is going to loan us towards the purchase price, 841,000, annual interest rate of 10%, loan term of 30 years, and she's going to charge us points of 3% of the principal, or 25,000 and change, due at signing of the loan, as we discussed. Okay, and then what you want to do, this is where in the real world, if you were working for the lender, or if you were working for the operator and checking the mortgage lender's information that's been provided to you, the first thing you want to do is solve for the uniform payment, right? We're assuming a uniform payment, fixed rate mortgages. So typically your managing director is going to say to you, we're getting this amount, annual interest rate of 10%. It's a 30-year mortgage, and we're paying points of 25,000. What's the uniform payment? Okay, so thing number one to know about finding the uniform payment, you always want to find out the uniform payment without considering any points or fees, beginning fees or points, back-end fees, anything like that. We just want to use uh, all the loan information with no fees at all. So that's what I'm concentrating on here, starting in row 34. Okay. Um, and what we know, here's our little cash flow diagram. So this is going to be this cash flow diagram from the mortgage lender's perspective. We know cash flow zero is going to be a negative 841,723. We know the interest rate. And just as was the case with Mr. Small Net Worth when we were doing time value of money, we want to solve for the uniform cash flow that the operator is going to pay us for 30 years, unless they're able to negotiate and leave early. But we're going to assume they're going for the whole 30 years for right now. So what I've got is this little table down here, starting in row 50, of the mortgage lender's cash flows for this mortgage without points. Okay, and I'm going to solve this using GoalSeek. You can also read all about it up here and see how it's done here to use Excel's payment function. I don't recommend that, but you're all big boys and girls, so the risk is on you in using that formula. The way I like to do this, and the way I recommend, is to make a little table like this. So we have time up here as usual in years. I'm skipping from 2 to 29 because I've got a whole bunch of hidden columns up here. So you can expand that and see that I've got all 30 years tucked away in there. And so at the beginning, at signing, from the mortgage lender's perspective, we have minus 841,000 and change going out the door. We know the interest rate that she's charging is 10%. Okay, and as always, with all these problems, we're going to need to know the present value of every stinking cash flow. So I've got the first one set up for us here. You can look at the formula up here. It's something that we're all very, very, very familiar with. And down here, I just have the sum of all of the cash flows. And that is what we have learned in our discounted cash flow chapter. The sum of all our discounted cash flows is the NPV, okay? And with no fees or anything like that, the beauty of this is that when we get all our payback amounts correct, all of these uniform cash flows coming back into us correct, and we discount at the lender's interest rate, the NPV has to be equal to 0. So that gives us a really good way to solve this in Excel using GoalSeek. So I just want to show you quickly here, all I need to do, so what am I going to do in GoalSeek? I'm going to do the usual thing. I'm going to take a guess at this uniform payment, and I'm going to keep guessing until I get this NPV equal to 0. I just want to show you right now what I've done here with cells 2 to 30. I only have to make one guess because it's uniform cash flow payment coming to us, fixed rate mortgage, uniform pay. So here in cell K51 in year 2, what do I say? I just say it's same payment amount as year 1, and et cetera, all the way out to year 30. Okay, so I just have to solve for that once. All right, so this is pretty good. So let's see if we can find this uniform payment. So I'm going to say data, what if analysis, goal seek, and I'm going to say set that NPV to 0 by changing cell uniform payment. In lieu of a sacrificial mentee, we get GoalSeek to do this for us. Okay, and that's it. That's looking pretty good here. My NPV is equal to 0 when my uniform payment, as we saw in class, and as we see up above using the PMT function of Microsoft's, we get 89,289 and change. So that's pretty great. So that's the way we solve for our uniform payment, and that's going to be step number 1 for you in an office, either if you decide to work on the lending side, or if you decide to work on the asset management side, where of course you always want to check the terms of any loan that a lender is offering you. Okay, so then we move on to step 2 for the lender. The lender is charging points. So now we want to get her comprehensive cash flows. Always, 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 for one player at a time, we need their comprehensive cash flows for the project, okay? So these are going to be in row 63 here for the lender. And what are her comprehensive cash flows? Well, in each period, she has either money going in or out the door related to the borrower, out the door to help purchase the property, and then in the door from the borrower, the uniform payment for 30 years. But also, she's got 3 points she's charging that borrower. 3%, that's equal to 3% of the total principal amount lended, which is 841,723. Okay, so remember, this is going to go out to whoever is selling the property, CAG in this case. This is going to come in from the borrower, all at t equals 0 when the mortgage is signed, which is also the same time the title is transferred to CMO. Okay, so we add these up and we get 816,471 net out the door for her on that day, and there are no other adjustments we need to make to her cash flows coming in other than what comes in from the operator, from the borrower, okay? So now what I want to do, always for the lender, we're interested in her IRR from her comprehensive cash flows, okay? That's really the representation of how she's doing on this project. And it really better be greater than 10% if she's got fees. So I'm going to solve for this in exactly the same way I solved for the uniform cash flow up above, except that now I don't know the interest rate. I don't know the IRR, but I do know here the uniform cash flows. I know all the cash flows. Okay, so the only thing I don't know is the IRR. How do we solve for the IRR? We compute the NPV with a trial IRR, and the correct IRR is the IRR for which the NPV is equal to 0 with fees. So I want to keep mucking around with this, okay, with this IRR. Let's say 10% here. That's not equal to 0, my NPV. I want to keep mucking around with my IRR until I get this NPV equal to 0. Okay, so let's see what we can do about that. So I'm going to do the same kind of thing. I've got data up. I'm going to go to GoalSeek. I'm going to say set that NPV to 0 by changing my trial IRR, which is in I-64. And there we go. And so her internal rate of return for this project is 10.4%. So that's great. Okay. Now, as you know, I also don't recommend using Excel's IRR formula, but we can check our work if we want by using Excel's IRR formula. So that's what I'm going to do down here in this sort of sickly pink colored cell. So I'm going to say equal to IRR. And I just got all my cash flows up here. Okay, and I'll take as a guess 0. What the heck? Okay, and as you can see, in this case, Excel gives us the right answer, the same answer we got for GoalSeek. Okay, so that's general rule for the lender, unless we have a very complicated structured finance type of deal or something like that. Lenders generally measure their performance with IRR. Not a smart idea for operators so much. But for lenders, it's pretty good. Okay, now let's go down. So that's it for the lender. We've found out everything we need to know for the lender, whether we are the lender working for the lender, or we are on the operator side checking the terms of the loan. So now let's go on and think about all the purchase finance details that we need to know from the operator side. We clearly need to know the purchase price. We clearly need to know all the terms of the mortgage we get from our lender, because that's going to say that's going to tell us how much of the purchase we have to pay up front and how much our mortgage payment is going to be every year to pay the lender back. And also at this time, we're going to need this for operating the property to compute taxes and also to help us when we're selling the property. This is the time to put together our roll forward loan interest / amortization table. This is slightly different than the first thing I showed us in class. We developed this exact same thing in class, but I just want to develop it with you here from scratch and leave it with you with every term included that we might want, including amortization. Okay, so at EOY 0, beginning of period, we don't go back to end of year -1. So that's NA, so this is all NA. Everything is NA at end of year 0 until loan principal at end of period. So the loan principal at the end of the period is 841,723. That's the principal that remains to be repaid. So now I want to roll out this table for all 30 years. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say, well, the loan principal at the beginning of period J plus 1 is equal to the loan principal at the end of period J. So I think I can just do this. And I think that's looking pretty good, at least for year one. Now, my mortgage payment, I know I had to compute that beforehand. So for my mortgage payment, I'm going to say equal to, where is my beautiful mortgage payment? Um, I can take my mortgage payment from pretty much anywhere up here that I've got it. I'm going to take it here from where I calculated it with GoalSeek, and I'm going to lock that down with an F4. Okay, so there's my mortgage payment. Okay, so the interest portion of the payment in each year is always the beginning of period principal balance times the interest rate. So that's going to be, here's my beginning of period in year one, principal balance times, what was the interest rate that the lender gave us? It was, of course, 10%, which is right here. And I would lock that down, except this cell already says int rate, so it's going to remain locked down. And I don't like those decimals there. I like to have the same number of decimals everywhere, and I like to have commas everywhere. It just makes it much, much easier to check that all my numbers make sense. Okay, let's see, principal amortization portion of that payment. Well, my total payment this year and every year is 89,289. And in this year, interest was, wow, it was almost all of it. But the amortization is the rest of the payment that wasn't the interest portion of the payment. So that's going to be equal to the total payment minus the interest portion. Okay, and that's about, so I have amortized at the end of year one after I've made this payment, I've amortized 5,000 of this $841,000 loan. Okay, so now what's my loan principal at the end of the period? It's my loan principal at the beginning of the period minus the amount that I've amortized. Okay, and now just looking at this in year one, I think everything I have here, I may have a mistake, but we'll see that soon enough. I don't think so. I think everything I have here is pretty general, so I can just expand this out, pull it over, expand this out for all 30 years. And I can quickly check, as you saw me do in class, whether or not I've done this properly, because at the very end of the day, by definition, with a uniform pay fully amortizing mortgage, at the end of the term of the mortgage, there is no principal left to pay off. So I better have 0 here, and I do. So I think I did that right. So that's it for how to do this. I am going to give you a homework asking you to do something very, very similar, and I'm going to have some more of the cells not pre-filled in for you just to make sure you understand everything. But you can refer to this spreadsheet as you need to help you solve the associated homework. Okay, I think that's it for now, so I'm going to check out and see you in our next class.